Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us at the special meeting of the Madera City Council. Today is Thursday, May 21st, 2020. The time is 6 p.m., and this meeting will be conducted pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order, which suspends certain requirements of the Ralph M. Brown Act. The City Council meeting will be streamed on the city's website, and members of the public may participate in the meeting remotely through an electronic meeting in the following ways: via phone by dialing 669-900-6833 and enter ID number 910-3930-3407. With that, Alicia, I will call for roll, please.
Mayor Medellin. Mayor Garcia.
Aye.
Councilmember Gallegos. Here. Member Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilmember Montes.
Here.
Councilmember Robinson.
Present.
And Councilmember Hawley.
Present.
Thank you so much, Alicia. And speaking of Councilmember Hawley, he will be the one giving us the invocation this evening. So if you're able to stand, please stand with me, and I'll turn it over to Councilman Hawley to lead us in the invocation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most Lord, gracious Father, we come to say thank you for this day. We thank you for those who are in bereaved. We pray for those that are suffering from this pandemic, COVID-19. Lord, give us strength and hope to our families. We pray our cities continue to do business as usual. So with that, Lord, we want to thank you for the giving of us perfect example of love through your Son, Jesus Christ. Give us the opportunity each day to be your hands and feet while we remain here on earth. I want to bless others like you have blessed me. I want my life to be a blessing to those in need, not for my own glory, but for the glory by you. Oh Lord, in our Christ Jesus' name we all say, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Mr. Councilman. Now, if you'll remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to the approval of the agenda, I'll ask my colleagues if there's any changes to this evening's agenda. We have just the one item. So if there are no changes or amendments to the agenda, I'll call for the question: approval of the agenda, please.
Second.
I have 4 firsts and 7 seconds. I'm going to say Councilwoman Gallegos move to approve the agenda, with a second by Councilman Robinson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all very much for your eagerness. It's a great way to start a meeting. Moving into public comment, members of the public shall address the council on items which are on matters of this particular agenda this evening. Anyone wishing to speak will be limited to 3 minutes. With that, I'll ask once again, Alicia, has anyone written in for public comment?
None received, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Seeing none, hearing none, I will close public comment and move into our item. This is our first item, or one and only item this evening. This is item A1, the draft capital improvement program for fiscal year 2021 through fiscal year 2024-2025.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members, the first thing I wanted to do is go ahead and introduce our staff. We have pretty much an all hands on deck for this meeting, similar to last year. And I'm just going to go through the slides here and identify those members, and they can go ahead and give a little self-introduction. And I'm going to be going in order of what I see on my screen at the moment. So the first one up is Ellen Bitter.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to hear what we're doing.
Absolutely. Hello, Ellen.
The next would be Frank Holguin from our inspection staff. Frank, we may be throwing you. You need to unmute yourself. That'll be in the lower left-hand corner.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
Hello, Frank. Thanks for joining us.
Next would be Mercedes Evangelista.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening, Mercedes.
Victor Aldama.
Hello, good evening. Nice to see you guys again.
Long time no see, Victor.
Yeah.
Tiffany Luba,
Hello, everyone.
Hello, good evening, Tiffany.
Randy Bell,
Good evening, all.
Hello, Randy, good to see you again.
Jennifer Stickman,
Hi, guys.
Hey, Jennifer. Hi.
Good to be here.
and Jerry Martinez.
Happy to be here.
Hey, Jerry.
We may yet have Jose Aguilar sign on. He had an appointment he had to make. But we'll go ahead and start into this, and I'll attempt to share my screen. Everybody got it?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
And Keith, if you give me just a quick minute before you start, I know this is going to be rather lengthy, so we'll try to take questions as they come, if that's okay with you, or if you want to do it intermittently. But I'll ask council at this time if they can use the little wavy hand option for a question, and then I'll try to recognize you as quickly as possible. I think that's probably going to be the safest since we have this slideshow presentation. I can't see all screens at once, but if you wave your hand, that I will be able to see, or use the chat option. Thank you very much. With that, Keith, go right ahead.
Thank you. And asking questions as we go through it is perfectly fine with me. We have quite a few projects that we're going to go through, and to go ahead and hold questions for anywhere between 10 and 30 or 40 might get a little bit confusing for everybody.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so we'll start out with what is a capital improvement program. It is a multi-year planning document used by the city to identify capital improvement projects and coordinate the financing and timing of the projects. It is a 5-year plan that identifies projects, priorities, and financing. The capital improvement program is subject to change for a variety of reasons. Council reprioritization, funding changes, staffing availability, project delays, emergency needs, and grants preparation. Any of these can pop up and cause us to rethink a schedule on a given project. One example of that would probably be the HSC project that came through 2 years ago. We reprioritized for that, and that became a very successful win for the city. CIP is adopted at the same time as the city budget. Tweaking is expected to be continuous through the budget adoption. You will see a couple things as we go through here that where we have to do a tweak or two. The CIP funding is annually appropriated, again coinciding with the city budget. General plan conformity. We basically follow the law on this. The state requires that the city prepare a capital improvement program to submit the CIP to the Planning Commission for review and to find the CIP in conformance with the general plan. The state law also requires a general plan conformity finding for acquisition or disposition of land, vacation of abandonment, or abandonment of street, or acquisition or construction of public buildings. Project categories, it spans all departments. All departments that have a capital project can be included in here. That is not always the case, but to the greatest degree possible, we try to go ahead and include those. So that will go through airport, community development, engineering, fire, police, parks, public works, and what used to be the RDA successor agency. There's still about 3 projects from the successor agency in here, and then also transit. Our guiding documents, we have the general plan, vision plan, specific plans for individual areas within the city, the MCTC's active transportation plan for walking and biking. That became a topic of the downtown transportation study recently when we were talking about the ATP included a bike track on Yosemite Avenue. Also includes the CIP, the impact fee programs, utility master plans, that's the water, the sewer, the storm drain, and then other special studies. Ellen Bitter is managing a sewer and water assessment right now, and that will be, we've been doing that for a little while. That will be throwing off projects.
Excuse me there.
Sure.
I don't have your screen up on my. Are you off the screen? I don't have the screen.
Can other people see my screen?
I can.
Yes.
I don't know why.
Yes, I can.
Yes, I can as well.
Councilman Holly, go to the top right corner and select an icon that looks like a box with a smaller box in it. It may be on the top left for you.
The only one I see up there says leave.
No, it should look like a big box.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. CIP process continued. Staff review of current needs and available new funding sources is another part of it. We look at needs related to progressive growth within the city, and you'll see an example of that later on when we talk about the Pecan Avenue sewer project. Internal discussions on priorities, schedules and funding, maintenance and other requests, risk assessments. Our funding sources, there is a myriad of funding sources. We have special revenues, which is gas tax, RSTP, Measure T, Measure K, SB1. SB1 is the RMRA. The RMRA is what allows us to do an expanded program of street maintenance, the seals and overlays programs. Enterprise utility funds, impact fees, water, sewer, storm drain, transit sources, airport sources. The FAA provides a fair amount of funding for work out at the airport, and other local and regional sources. Now you'll note I've highlighted a couple lines here in red, and there's a reason for that. I want to go ahead and focus on that for just a second. Much of what we see in the CIP this year, we've made some adjustments based upon the COVID impacts. Not necessarily for this year in terms of what we're doing, but as we move into outer years, starting next fiscal year, 2021, which we're talking about, we've had feedback from the Madera County Transportation Commission that indicates that our revenues could drop by, I believe, is 15-something% in that year, and that would hit our local transportation funds and our Measure T program. We've made those adjustments in our funding sources in terms of our revenue. They also suggested that those impacts would take as much as 3 additional years to recover. So we don't consider ourselves getting back up to where we would be until the last year in the, forgive me, keep my light going. We don't assume that we get back to the normal funding sources until the last year or the 5th year in the capital improvement program. So one of the things that we were thinking about as we were going through this, we may be impacted in ways we'd rather not be with reduced funding, but one of the things we thought about is the RMRA, Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Account. We have been doing what the primary goal of that is in the last 3 years or so since that became a real funding source for us, which is to do seals and overlays on existing roadways. But the way the law is written with regard to the RMRA, it does provide us some flexibility. So if we needed to, we believe that we could go ahead and shift some of those funds over to other projects. I'm not suggesting that we do that right now, and our CIP does not assume that at the moment. But I want to go ahead and let council know that they do have some flexibility, and we may revisit that as need be in the future. Commissions review and make recommendations to the city. That's another way that things can be added to the CIP. The City Council approval of this. The CIP session represents an opportunity for council to provide guidance and direction. Much the same as last year, council can make recommendations on projects and ask about certain projects, and we can include those in our CIP and make adjustments to go ahead and fund those as council directs that we do so. Ultimately, the approval occurs during the budget process, but this still gives us the ability to talk about moving those projects around and adjusting the annual budget. Also, some projects are created and funded outside of the city budget. Everything we do here, for the most part, if we get it right, we'll add it into our munis or our county portion of the system, and that will be there and available for next year. But if we identify special projects, we will bring those back to council separately and request permission from council to fund those if council deems them to be something that council would want to move forward with. Regardless of the direction received here, staff will submit projects not previously conformed to the Planning Commission. Every year we submit to the Planning Commission various projects, and to the best of our ability, we make certain that all projects that have the potential to become reality, we take to Planning Commission. If we miss one during this meeting, we will take that to Planning Commission just to make certain it's conformed. It doesn't mean that council's approved of it, but it'll allow us to be conformed in advance. Now, I want to go ahead and do an observation, of what we've got going here, or what many council members may have already observed. We do have a lot of projects in the CIP, and based upon last year, you saw a lot of projects. Not all of them have come to fruition. You've seen a lot of projects come to fruition, but we've attempted to go ahead and winnow them down a little bit, but not completely. So you'll see a lot there. Not all of them will move forward. But we'll have them at the ready to move forward if we're able to go ahead and put staff on it, or if we're successful in doing what we would like to do, which would be to expand our capabilities by adding on-call consultants. Now we'll start to move into the projects. So the first part of this, one of about 12 sections, is the major road capacity enhancing projects. The top of the list is Olive Avenue widening. What you've already seen on that project is the demolition of multiple buildings that occurred back in February. The underground utilities were awarded at the May 6th council meeting, and we are looking at advertising in July 2020 of this year. We were looking at June, but our deputy city engineer, he has indicated that he will be retiring, so we do need to, we're going to be adjusting a little bit on this and bringing other staff up to speed on it. The drawings, as I know, are close to 100%. The things that we also know about is we still have some issues to overcome with the railroad. So as we move through this, we're looking at advertising the project as it is. And if we're not able to get to the conclusion that we want to with the railroad, we may pull the railroad crossing out of the package and let that slide for a bit. Moving on, Almond Avenue traffic study. That was moved up on the list at the last CIP meeting back in April of last year. We have not made any progress on that on this particular project. We've made progress on multiple other projects, which did cause us to fall a little bit fall behind. We are planning on doing the traffic study in 2021. It's about the same as what you saw before, but we're adding a couple things to the study. We already knew from last year that we were going to look at Stadium Road and Almond Avenue from about Pine Street all the way to Madera Avenue. We had talked about the potential of doing a piece of Howard and Pine. We still would like to do a piece of that, subject to our having the funds to do it. We may go ahead and move forward with the design, again, based upon funding, and carry that forward into a project, whether it's with Almond or a future project. And then we're also adding, as part of the Stadium Road analysis, we want to go ahead and add in the Pine Street intersection with the high school, which also shares a driveway with the Freedom Industrial Park. We've been hearing about some traffic concerns there, and we think that this would be a good opportunity to study that and potentially work towards a bit of a solution. The design on that will also follow in 2021, more than likely following up from the traffic study to some degree, because the traffic study will make recommendations towards what kind of a physical improvements we'll be doing. How many traffic signals might we consider, or do we need dual levs at certain locations, that sort of thing. Construction, we were originally thinking 21, 22 on this, but this is one of the areas where COVID-19 caused us to rethink schedules, as between the reductions I talked about earlier, we've probably on paper, we're showing $300,000 to $400,000 plus losses in revenue for for those revenue sources that would fund a project like this. And just a tidbit of information, the Avenue 17 Sharon Boulevard road improvements, while it was done privately, it still represented a public-private partnership between the city and Love's. This was a significant project for the city. In addition to the roadway improvements that you see out there, we also have a water well worth about $2 million. That was a major improvement to come along with that project. Showing the projects, we have Olive Avenue, Almond Avenue. This is basically the same slide as last year. The subdivider that was building the subdivision on the southwest corner of Stadium and Almond Avenue has progressed on that significantly. Our project would be to go ahead and widen to the north on Almond Avenue between Stadium and the west end of that project, and then move across through this area here. I assume you can all see my mouse.
Yeah.
What we'll be looking at through here is constructing the road generally in this alignment. The MID canal would have to be undergrounded. It's a fairly large canal, so we'll probably be looking at at least a single box structure rather than a pipe. And I'm afraid it might go as much as 2-box structure, but I think one will do it. And then as we come through here, it'll have to come off of the normal alignment to connect with this intersection here. This is Love's. You'll see a couple unique things here. One is it's a relatively large arterial street for the city right now. Our typical medians are 16 feet. What this median here will be in the future is 32 foot wide to allow for dual Fs to go into a future shopping center on the north side of the intersection. Down in this area, you'll see that we have bike lane improvements that have been striped in, and we have a little bit more of the more contemporary bike lane striping going in there. Continuing on, major capacity enhancing projects, Pine Street reconstruction. We've slid that out to 24, 25 at a minimum right now for construction, and Lake Street widening, that's at the back end of this at the moment. Any of these projects, of course, can be moved around according to council's direction. And that was Pine Street, fairly short section that had some right-of-way issues, which we think we can overcome fairly easily. And then this was Lake Street. Lake Street has a number of properties that need to be purchased. It will be a bit of a bear to go ahead and purchase all those properties and make it work out in a timely manner. It'll be relatively expensive. Road rehabilitation projects. We have a number of projects here and these are the various different funding sources. SB1 is the road maintenance and rehabilitation account. SB1 local partnership program where we match monies with that, and then our typical Measure T programs. This is a project that came straight out of our last CIP from last year. There was an observation that the curb line on Gateway next to the Rotary Park was buckling. It was at the very least unattractive. At the very worst, it might be unsafe if the driver were to move to the right a little bit too much. They might catch one of those curbs as a ramp. So what was done is we cut out the curb that was here before. We moved we did a saw cut in the pavement, and we narrowed the road, and we installed an asphalt dike. There was parallel parking through there that's been removed, but we have a pretty clean road now. This is an example of seal and overlay. This is over by the post office. You'll notice it's fairly well cracked up after the seal. We've got a pretty decent looking roadway. This is before it was striped.
Keith?
Yeah.
Keith, can you go back to the Rotary Park there, the one
Sure.
before this? I really just want to make a comment. It was this time last year that council was very concerned about how ugly this looked, and that picture on the left shows it. And I just want to say that you and the team acted swiftly. It was money well spent, and the company that did the work, I think, did an outstanding job. And it was done, as far as I'm concerned, for a government entity, it was done rather quickly. So I just wanted to say thank you very much. As people who don't live in Madera get off of Cleveland in that particular area and visit Madera or get gas or whatever, it's just a whole different look. So I just wanted to say thank you and the team for that. I think
Thank you. Appreciate
I like to get all that. That is very nice. Just do the other side now.
Let's see, we'll move on to sidewalks here, and I believe Victor Aldama was prepared to go ahead and give this presentation.
And before Victor speaks, Councilman Rodriguez has a question.
Yes, Keith, and thank you for touching on those sidewalks there. Keith, I did want to ask, whenever you guys take on a project with sidewalks and all, do you have any influence on the trees that are being planted? And I ask that because it's not only in parks that you see this, but you see this around certain streets out in neighborhoods and residential areas. Does engineering take anything into account when considering planting trees?
We do, for the most part, we've been removing trees as we go through, like Sunset Road. There was a number of trees, large trees that were in the way. We removed those, and I'll let Victor potentially go ahead and talk about that a little bit. When property owners wish to install trees, we have a street tree list that's intended to, if you use those trees along with recommended measures to keep the roots down, that should help tremendously in terms of damage. When we do a larger road project, we do look to mitigate the trees that are in place. We haven't so much on the sidewalks, but I'll let Victor answer in terms of has any property owners requested replacement trees?
Yeah, so basically as part of our projects, we usually go and ask the property owners first whether they would like a replacement tree. And based on their response, we give them a list of trees. In this case, there's about 3 different type of trees that we have coordinated with parks to be approved as a replacement tree. Basically, those trees don't extend too far out, and it usually just goes all the way down only and doesn't extend outwards. But yes.
Thank you, Victor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any more questions?
No, that's all. Thank you very much. Let's proceed.
Okay. Victor?
Right, now moving on, the next following slides will consist of projects that are either completed or near completion. As you may be aware already, we currently have a sidewalk project going along Washington School. This project is funded with CDBG and Measure T dollars. The project is currently under construction with expected completion within the next 2 weeks. So we will be hearing from us again within 2 weeks, 3 weeks time frame again with the acceptance project. The following project will be Sunset Avenue Sidewalks. This project was accepted during last night's meeting. This project is funded with CIP funding and Measure T. It consisted of basically installing nearly a mile worth of sidewalk and pedestrian median refuges in front of the Thomas Jefferson School. Okay, here's a picture representing what's being installed right now in front of Washington Elementary School. The picture is along Austin Avenue. Okay, can you move on to the next slide, Keith?
Sure.
Okay, now I'll turn it over to Ellen Bitter. She's currently managing this project, so I'll let her talk.
Thank you, Victor.
Myself and also Frank Holguin is playing a huge role in the construction of this. This is the undercrossing of Gateway Drive and Union Pacific Railroad for our new bicycle pedestrian facility. It's moving along slow but steady, kind of following the same bumpy course of getting all the approvals. We've managed to find just about every conflict that could be in a riverbed that's been developed over the last 100 years. Lots of unknown utilities. Kinder Morgan, the petroleum or the pipeline is having a few issues with our design, but we're working through them. We do expect that this will be complete this summer and ready once we have a special canopy that needs to be installed under the railroad, and that'll probably be the last item to go in, and when that's in, then we'll be open for business.
Hey, moving on to more good news, of course, there's going to be more sidewalk projects to come. As listed here, there's going to be several. The first one being Gateway Central and 3rd. A map will be shown later after this couple slides, but the following one is going to be Stadium Road, Maple Street, Santa Cruz Street, Monterey. This is basically funded with CDBG and will provide sidewalks surrounding, I believe, what was James Madison Elementary School next to Madera North Campus. The next project is Lily Street and Vineyard, funded with CDBG. This project was partially funded during last year's CDBG allocation with an expectation that our department would be submitting the following half for this year's allocation. Next project is Schnorr Avenue, Sunset Avenue to Riverside Sidewalk Project, funded with CMAQ and Measure T dollars. The next couple of one is funded with the newly awarded HSC Grant, which will consist of safety improvements in front of Washington School Elementary, adding rectangular rapid flashing beacon and high visibility crosswalks. We'll be also adding curb bulb outs at 5th Street, C Street, and East Street. Lastly, we'll be installing bike lane improvements at various locations throughout town. Okay, now here represents those locations that I was talking to you about. The Washington School project is on that northeast corner. All of those blue lines will be completed within the next 2 weeks. The pedestrian gateway undercrossing is the one on the west side. And the Gateway Central and 3rd, it's right at the bottom that has a triangle. Okay, now is this other two projects are funded with CDBG. As I mentioned earlier, the one on the bottom side, it's the one right around James Madison Elementary School, which is already moving forward towards design. And then the other one at close to Martin Luther King Middle School, which is being requested for additional funding during the CDBG cycle.
Good.
Okay, now I'll turn this over to Keith.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Victor. Can we go back a couple of slides, please? Right there. And this may or may not be the time to discuss it, but since we're under the pedestrian improvements, there's a couple that I wanted to bring to council's attention to consider to possibly add to the 5-year CIP plan. The first one being there in the upper right-hand corner, as you talked about Washington School, South Street and Lake Street, that improvement that's under construction for the sidewalk program. Mm-hmm. At South Street and Lake Street is where not long ago there was a mother walking to school that was hit by a vehicle, and thank goodness she wasn't too terribly injured. But these sidewalks are going to serve a huge purpose because, especially at Washington School, the heart of Madera, I'm going to say 90% of those people walk to school, whether the kids walk by themselves or they're accompanied by a parent. And we also have in this evening CIP at South and B Street, where we're going to put reflectors, another high traffic area. But at South and Lake Street, Keith, is there something we can do traffic control along Lake Street? And I'm not asking necessarily for crosswalks or anything, but because we're putting these sidewalks in that area, is there something you may suggest or something that we can do for traffic calming, for to bring awareness to the amount of pedestrians that are in that particular area? And what comes to mind is either flashers or over at on Olive Avenue at the Madera High Campus, there's a solar powered something that tells you how fast you're going, and if you're going beyond the speed limit, it kind of flashes. Is that something that we can consider in this area? And what I do want to mention as well is this is the public speaking. There's been a number of neighborhood watch meetings in this particular area that Councilman Montes, this is his district, that he's attended. He's heard from a number of people, and so have I. And they want to know if there's something we can do at D and South, which I believe we are, and also at Lake and South.
Yes, we. After the report was published, I went through it and realized that it was more than a typo. It was a word missing. We are actually, and you'll see it coming up in this slideshow, that we're proposing flashers, rapid flat, rectangular rapid flashing beacons.
Oh, great!
At Lake and South. So you'll see a few of those coming up, and there was one other thing that we missed in there, and we've added that. You'll see that coming up too. So at Lake and South, yes, rapid. I'm just going to say those flasher things.
Okay, good enough.
So we're planning on those, subject to council approval. We're looking at Lake and Adele. We're looking at flashing stop signs. D and South, we had those flashing stop signs, but this is probably the time that I'll choose to go ahead and talk about this. The CDBG grant applications have been submitted, and we've submitted a substantial number of projects. We don't expect to be funded by them, but we're providing options. Okay. At D and South, we have a traffic signal shown as a possible expense or possible improvement. It's a location that our impact fee program is not eligible to pay for. So it requires transportation funding or things like CDBG. So we're showing the possibility of a traffic signal at that location. And did I miss one location? I'm sorry, you mentioned two, and I want to make certain I hit them.
I haven't brought up the second one yet, but at D and South, as part of this 5-year plan, don't we have flashers at that intersection that we're approving tonight?
That's in the AHSC for flashers at D and South, yes.
Okay.
And when we get to it, I'll note that.
Okay.
Can I chime in?
Sure.
Real quick. So I just want to say thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Keith, for listening to the community and us kind of scream and say, hey, we need something to go on here. And I just wanted to talk about the radar speed sign. I know we have it at around a lot of other schools. So that was one of the things that they went. I don't know if it's going to be on your presentation on your slide, but if that's something that we can also consider. On that Lake and South, because I get a lot of complaints there. I'm sure the mayor does too. Other council members probably get them as well, even though it's not their area. So I really do appreciate you listening to the community and putting this on there.
Oh, sure. It is important, and we want to go ahead and do what the community would like to see. We very much want to make certain that they are safe. I would note that we did do a traffic review of the location. We looked at stop sign warrants and we looked at traffic signal warrants. It didn't meet those, and probably never will, because it's pretty much built out there. But it is a location. It's locations where pedestrians cross arterial roadways. You really need to, if you can, put some additional thought into it. I'd like to do more, what do we call it? Complete studies of arterials, and ultimately look to focus pedestrians into one area rather than multiple areas. And this is a start. The equipment that we put out here, we can pick up and move it if we need to put it at a more precise location. But I think that this is probably the location where it will stay, regardless of what we do. We won't be looking at that for a little while, but Lake and River side, or is it River View? That's a location where I understand pedestrians are crossing too, and ultimately we would probably want to try to get those pedestrians to move over to this location because it will be that will be the safest location.
Yeah. Thank you, Keith. And the sidewalks that have been put in and the sidewalks under construction, I really truly believe those are going to save lives. That's fantastic in that area. Councilman Hawley, did you have something to add?
Yes, I've been getting I agree with you guys that one going Lake and South Street, crossing that street right over there to an alley toward those apartments is really a bad situation. So whatever we can do to slow that traffic down right there, it'd be a lot of help to the city. I've seen kids almost get hit crossing that street, and what makes it so hard is that as they cross over on the lake side, it's an apartment, and right there is driveway. So a lot of folks are just turning up in the driveway instead of waiting on the kids to cross the street. So anything we can do to stop that traffic coming from both angles will be a beneficial help.
Okay, for sure. I've heard I heard radar speed signs mentioned twice during this discussion. We'll look at that potential.
Thank you, Keith.
You're welcome. Sidewalks, damaged areas. This goes back to the policies that the city has in place with regard to damaged sidewalks. It's been historically when there's a sidewalk that's damaged because of trees or the like, it's generally stayed the way it has, and they get repaired typically when there's a complaint. The complaint comes in, and it given the California Vehicle Code, the complaint is passed along to the property owner. The property owner becomes responsible for that repair. Everybody recognizes that this is not a perfect program or situation, but that is part of the way it is. And there's pluses and minuses to leaving the program or the policy the way it is, or to improving it. While not addressing the policy itself, what staff has done is we've taken the survey that was prepared for the CDBG funding, which is one of those higher rated comments was to improve accessibility. What we're proposing, one of the programs we're proposing in the CDBG application is to take $100,000 and apply that to fixing sidewalks within the eligible census tracts for the CDBG. So what that would represent would be repairing sidewalks that have been lifted by trees, probably removing the offending trees, grinding down the lips on various sidewalks where there's issues. I can't tell you how far that might go for that amount of funding, but it's a start towards improving accessibility and safety. And I basically hit both slides in that one little dialogue. The next part of this is AHSC, and I'm going to send it right back to Victor.
Okay, now moving on to the next big project of sidewalks. As Keith had mentioned earlier, we were successful with this, although we did spend quite a bit of time. It was well worth it. So the project will provide about 5 miles worth of sidewalk, 3 miles worth of bike lane. At this time, we're anticipating design starting in 2020, 2021, with expected completion in the summer of 2022.
Victor.
Yes.
In your assessment for sidewalks, I noticed we've been talking about getting that sidewalk on 8th Street from Sunrise up to Clinton. And yet, that is really a major thing it was supposed to have been done years ago when they started doing the sidewalks over on the southeast side of town. That section there was the only section that was left out as I can remember. So I think that in your capability of doing sidewalks, we need to look at that one more time and try to do something about it, because it's the only sidewalk that I can look at in this area that was left out. All the rest of them was completed all throughout the southeast side. But that portion coming from the Rehabilitation Center up to Clinton did not get done.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely look at it after, and I mean, talk about it further.
Well,
okay.
What we'll do is we'll put it on. We started a priority list some time ago. The projects don't come in very quickly, but the priorities have been, for the most part, addressing the elementary schools and the younger children, their approaches to school. So we'll put this on our list, and I'm not sure, that might very well be on one of those lists that we need to look at.
Right, now moving on, this is a representation of what the HSC grant will be completed with. As you can see, sidewalk improvements will be performed all around town. So, yes. Just to give a brief scope of the size of the project, there's roughly about $3.5 million worth of HSC grant that will be part of capital improvement projects for this coming up a few years. Right, I'll turn it over to Keith now to talk about streetlights.
I'm sorry, Victor and Keith, before we go on, there was that second one that I wanted to discuss back on pedestrian improvements. Again, this goes back to Neighborhood Watch in the area west of Town and Country Park off of Granada. And also at the next council meeting, we're going to have a presentation by our Youth Leadership Council. And they too brought up the lack of a crosswalk on Granada, South Granada Drive at Plumas, which would connect all the residents on the west side of Granada to walk to Town and Country Park. As it is right now, all those residents have to walk north to the intersection of Howard and Granada, cross over, and then walk, which is the apartment complex, and there are no sidewalks there. So I'd like to at least do a study and hopefully add it to this 5-year CIP for some sort of lighted or flashing crosswalk at Granada, and I believe it's Plumas, not an industrial. That may be a difficult intersection to cross, and I don't have a map to show you.
Sure. With that was our oversight with the report, and ultimately it did find its way into this PowerPoint. So we will be coming up on another section as well, and we'll talk a little bit about that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Streetlights. We have no capital improvement projects that are moving forward right now. This is just to say that the NG services will be that 150 streetlight portion of the project will be moving forward, and at some point in time, and the locations will still be settled with council in the upcoming weeks or probably weeks.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Sir, Councilman Rodriguez.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. I know that there's nothing really for the streetlights. NG is taking on this, but I did make a comment on this before, that when we do consider these streetlights, let's also consider these possible Wi-Fi routers at the top of the streetlights to try to make our city a bit more of an innovative city with Wi-Fi. Not sure if it's something that lies in your department, but certainly something to reach out to even the school district and trying to bring Wi-Fi for our community, especially more on the east side, if these lights are being placed in these areas. So again, this is something that we'll probably have a discussion with when Angie brings this forward.
Okay, thank you. We'll I know we'll be talking about it.
I have a major interruption.
Okay.
Derek needs Mark to call him. His computer froze.
Thank you.
He's not on, so he needs somebody, Mark, to call, give him a call.
I'll have Mark give him a call right now. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Councilman.
Should I hold or?
No, you go ahead.
I go ahead and proceed, Keith.
Okay. Now moving into the next section, which is traffic signal and pedestrian safety devices. There were quite a few signals on the list last year, and you're going to see.
He's going to call you right now. All right.
Several of them have moved forward. Howard Road and Granada Drive and Howard Road and Westbury. They were brought to council last night for award. Olive Avenue in Knox and Olive and Roosevelt will be in the Olive Avenue project itself. There's also modification to the intersection of Olive Avenue and Gateway. The Tozier Street and Sunrise signal is nearly complete. Sharon Avenue, Avenue 17, there's a public signal that will be completed by about July, as I understand it. And there's also a signal at their driveway that should be completed about the same time. Additional projects. Stadium Road and Gary Lane Hawk, the request for proposal, I've seen a draft of that. That's starting to move forward. Granada and Industrial Crosswalk Evaluation, which is what we were just talking about. Victor, can you provide a little bit of insight into that?
Yes. So what we ended up doing is we did perform a study at that location, and the study did conclude that a crosswalk warrant would be met at Industrial and Granada. One of the things that I came upon conclusion of the report is that along with the improvement, we would need to construct a new curb ramp, access ramp, in order to install the new crosswalk. Along with that, we would be proposing a new rectangular rapid flashing beacon at that location. The other thing is we did look into Puma Street, like Mr. Mayor had mentioned. One of the constraints at that location was that in order to put a crosswalk at that location, we would need to construct more sidewalk improvements to meet ADA compliance. So that's one of the reasoning why we didn't consider that location as a higher priority. The other thing that was considered was that the northeast corner, the northwest corner subdivision would be taking advantage of industrial, as well as the south portion of that, the southwest corner would be able to use the same crosswalk instead of walking all the way up there, all the way to Puma Street. Yeah, so as part of that, it would serve the entire west portion of Granada Street rather than just that northwest corner if we were to put it in Puma Street.
You certainly know better than I do, Victor. Thank you very much for that. I guess I was just assuming that at more of a street that poured out onto Granada. So what you're saying at Industrial, yeah, right in that particular area, that's where the crosswalk would be. And yeah. I'm assuming on the northerly side of Industrial.
Correct,
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct, right there. Yeah, where there's already an existing ramp, so we would need to construct a new ramp on the west portion of the street. Yep, there you go.
Great.
Yeah.
So less improvements, less money, and we can get it done quicker.
Correct, yeah.
And it still serves the purpose for the residents on the west side of Granada.
Correct, yeah.
Great.
And just to put it in perspective too, we did meet with a couple of homeowners that live within that residential area. We gave them the opportunity to comment on the location and showed them whatever our proposed improvements would be. And most of them did conclude that Industrial would be the adequate location. So.
Great. No, I certainly value your expertise, and Councilman Rodriguez and myself have taken quite a bit of testimony over a number of neighborhood watch meetings in that particular area. I think over on Merlot and Granada in that particular area. So they'll be happy to hear that. Thank you very much.
No problem.
For that.
Right, turning it back to Keith.
Great. Thanks, Victor.
Thank you, Victor. Okay, we talked about the Granada and Industrial. The D and South flashing stop sign. That remains fixed in the CIP unless the D and South traffic signal is determined to be something that council would like to move forward with. It takes a significant bite out of the CDBG funding, though. Traffic signals, we've been seeing them come in high, as you saw last night. This is probably at least $500,000. We would, if it rises to the top, we could potentially find additional funding through our other funding sources. Lake and South. This is the more than just a typo I mentioned earlier. It should have said South and D. So we're looking at the rapid rectangular rapid flashing beacon. I'm gonna stop saying that.
The flashy things. We've heard from parents with regard to the crossing at Lake and Adele. They've been looking for improvements at that location, and we've considered it, but they've been asking for they've asked for a traffic signal. There's already four-way stop there. We're simply not sure that a traffic signal will ever go in that location. For the last year plus, we've been pursuing a strategy that would line up Adele Street with, oh, I lost it. That would line up Adele Street with Kennedy Street. And I believe that we're going to zoom right in on there. Okay, I'm going to show you my newly acquired skills with regard to this. If Arnaldo would be kind enough to allow me control. You got the ball, Keith. Let me see you score.
Okay. There we go. This is what we're looking at right now, is the potential to go ahead and line up Kennedy with Adele by doing what's called an interconnect. Adele Street, more than likely in the future, would be cul-de-sac. This area here would end up having a worm island, which would only allow for lefts onto Adele or lefts onto Adele this way, and then right in, right out. There's a developer that is looking at this area. They've got some design plans. We're working towards some basically it's funding issues between the developer and the city, and we're looking to go ahead and solve those over time, hopefully. But this is what we're looking at. So the point of my bringing this up is, if this occurs, a traffic signal would not want to be here. It would want to be here at Kennedy and Lake Street. This would be set up with, still have the sidewalks, and we try to go ahead and work in a pedestrian refuge. But that's essentially what we're working towards at the moment there. So in the meantime, flashing stop signs would seem to be more appropriate.
And if I may, Keith, on that particular project, if it comes to fruition, I know Councilman Robinson had mentioned once before that Adele Street is probably the worst street we have in the city. If that area was to be developed, I'm assuming that what we see in Adele Street, especially if it's going to be cul-de-sac, would be completely redone, including improvements like curb, gutter, sidewalk, things like that.
It would be, but at the moment would probably occur through private development. It's looking like we're going to have to do a pavement rehabilitation on that roadway. There was a concern that came through recently, and I went to Street View on the project, and it's a roadway that needs some care,
to say the least.
To say the least. So that'll probably be, we're going to get to see how much care.
Yeah. I don't think that does it justice, and Councilman Robinson's suspension will tell you that.
Yes.
Is that's all that proposed area right there? That's residential, I'm assuming.
It is residential.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir, Councilman Rodriguez.
And I'm sorry, Keith, as you're going down, especially on North Lake Street, was there any plans on adding any intersection or lights on Sherwood and Lake Street across the street from the Pan Am?
We have reviewed Sherwood a number of times, and it hasn't gotten to the point where it meets warrants. If we're going to be doing anything there, it's probably going to be trying to figure out where we really want the pedestrians to cross. It's not getting to the point where we would put a signal in, and I would recommend against putting stop signs in place, because if you're not going to meet warrants for a signal, ultimately as traffic continues to increase on Lake Street, the stop signs could become a fairly serious detriment in terms of the ability to keep the public safe.
Yeah, and I only say that because similar to Industrial and Granada, I think you have a lot of residents that utilize that park there, and I think that Sherwood certainly would warrant some type of if not a crosswalk with flashing beacons or some type of intersection there with lights, because there is quite a bit of traffic. I walked those streets myself, and I saw the amount of traffic that was there. But again, I guess you guys have done your studies, and that didn't warrant for a traffic light at the moment. Is that correct?
That's correct. I will go ahead and volunteer that the high-speed rail, they've had a number of closures for a while, and we've been a little bit hamstrung in terms of getting accurate counts anywhere, because they're causing traffic to be distorted from what it might normally be. I'm trying to think. Ellen probably could go ahead and say whether she thinks that traffic is actually higher or lower right now. She goes through that a little bit more and sees the impacts. Ellen, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I used to go through it. With the closure of Road 27, all of the traffic that would normally come down Lake Street from the Country Club area now goes to Road 26.
Yes.
So I'm afraid that if we did traffic counts now, it probably would show that the signal isn't warranted. If they open 27 back up, the increase in traffic might justify it.
Yeah, and just a little bit of a couple more thoughts about that location. It is not a location where impact fees would be eligible to pay for it, so that would be a cost against a full cost against one of our other accounts. But if a signal location is warranted and it's about safety, then you do what you do.
Yeah,
but it sounds like we're going to be looking at potential for flashers at that location.
Councilman Montes, did you have something?
Yeah, well, I wanted to agree with that last point that Keith just made and back up Councilman Rodriguez, but I also wanted to ask, so last year you said there's about 7,000 trips each way there on Lake, and that doesn't warrant a stop sign or a signal light. But when we have these planned improvements there, is that something that, if we make the improvements, then the traffic will increase? Is it like with Ellen's example where they've closed the street in one area, so it kind of people are redirected? I know that on Lake and I want to say by Dalton, there's a pretty good a bottleneck there because there's a stop sign. So if you try to go to there anytime in the morning or around 3 o'clock, and Councilmember Robinson can attest to that, you're going to be stuck there for a long time. So having those, I don't know, traffic improvements, would that help us, or is that why we're delaying some of those things? Or
Well, I don't think we were really even close to meeting warrants for stop signs or signal. So it's probably unlikely that any changes made in the rest of the system would affect that, unless they're really an impediment on Lake Street that causes people to say, I'm not going here, and just simply not going here.
I think the big bottleneck that I see is on Lake and Lincoln, and then Sherwood. I mean, there's no people fly through there. So I can see why people, and people have reached out to me as well from those apartments this year by Pan Am. The kids going to school. Same thing is with, around Washington, because you do have a school just north of that on Sherwood. So I'm in agreement with putting some pedestrian improvement there. Monroe, yeah. I should know. I went there.
Okay, so it sounds like we're looking at flashers at that location.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
At the least, Keith, just so that we have safe crossing for some folks that are trying to cross to that park.
Yeah, sure. We'll look at that, and I'm curious to see what our hawk does when it goes in. That one had a very specific purpose, and that was because of the heavy traffic. We wanted to go ahead and get it to act more like a traffic signal. Who knows? Locations like this might, come into play.
The hawk's been busy with the crows downtown.
It has been, but if we can get that hawk down on the stadium, we'll be doing good. Well,
okay. Councilman Robinson, did you have something else?
Yes, like you're saying, putting some flashing lights over there on Lake, right by the park, Pan Am, senior center, and just like at Persian Elementary, when I asked about crossing a crosswalk and flashing lights, and they put it in, when Thule was in.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be perfect because we right by the park. They have an incline or whatever. You can't really see the traffic on the right going north. And you're trying to cross the intersection. That's kind of dangerous.
Yes. I'm sorry. Were there flashers here yet?
No.
At Pershing, they're installed now.
Okay.
They're now, yeah.
I had the vague recollection that they were there, but it's been a few years since we did all that.
Yeah, those are in.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be perfect for Sherwood and Lake.
Great, thank you, Mr. Councilman.
Yeah, these are the in-pavement ones. We don't particularly care for the in-pavement crosswalk flashers anymore. Okay, I'm gonna say those really fast flashing ones. They get better than 90% compliance, and I think that these are a little bit less, but they still do their job. So for as long as these are working, I hope they last for a long time. Okay.
Why don't we pick up where we left off? I think we finished the south and D flash. Are we completed the traffic signal portion? There we are.
Yes, I think we have completed all of that. We passed Lake and Adele. So recently completed on this particular category, signal and pedestrian safety devices. We have the Caitlin Drive and Isla Vista Court. We should start to see some pictures. These are the traffic signals and pedestrian devices around town. You'll see there's a smattering of places throughout. They're upcoming and nearly complete or complete. This is the Caitlin Drive in Isla Vista. It's this picture was about a week ago. The striping is in, the medians are in. They have the stamped concrete, so they're relatively attractive, and they should do their job with it. You know, that's what we expect.
They look very good.
Yes. At this point, we can take an intermission or more questions, or move along.
If there's no questions, I say we move along. We continue to progress.
Okay. And at this point, we're on the Parks projects, and John Scarborough will provide a discussion with regard to the projects that are on the Parks CIP list.
Are we skipping the sewer, water, and storm drain item 5, or are we going to come back to that?
We're coming up. We're a little out of sync on the numbering. We added a couple of categories.
No problem. No problem. Hey, John, how's it going?
Hello, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay. I'm sorry. My screen showed that I was being muted. So thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll give you a brief overview of these projects and then be available to answer any questions. So the first project, the Sunrise Rotary Park project, this has existed in the city for a number of years. It currently consists of the construction of a parking lot, curb and gutter, and landscape improvements around the soccer field that was built just adjacent to the softball fields at the park. We currently have about $80,000 programmed into this project to finalize construction plans in the next fiscal year, meaning 2021. We have construction envisioned, I guess is a good way to say it, in the following fiscal year, which is 21-22. The problem is at this point is that construction is not fully funded. It's actually well short of being able to construct that project. So we're going to be looking at that going forward to see what kind of options we have. We actually have applied for 2 separate grants in regards to this project, have been denied for both of them. We recently applied for a Prop 68 grant. I believe it was in the fall of last year. And I think we found out about February or March that we did not get awarded. We are hopeful that having an actual plan set and an accurate engineer's estimate will help to make us, I guess, more competitive in the grant arena. There's something that the granting agencies have indicated that they like the project. They think that we have a pretty good proposal, but we're just not getting over the hump. So we're hopeful that the $80,000 programmed in the next year to complete plans will get us over that hump. Most of the rest of these projects, you'll see a little bit of a commonality, and that is planning. So India Park, I think everybody's aware that we recently closed escrow. We received the deed for the property. We are free and clear owners of that 8-acre park. Going back to the grant item, it seems to be prudent at this point in time to develop what we would call a shelf-ready project. In other words, hire a consultant to draw conceptual designs that we can use to hold community meetings to get input on what the park will ultimately look like, and then move forward with plans and specifications, do the environmental work. We believe that if we do that, we're going to be well positioned as grant opportunities come up, or in just a couple of years, if the building continues at the rate that it has, there's a possibility that we could fund the construction of one of these park projects, or maybe even a couple of them, using developer impact fee revenue. So the plan with India Park is to move forward to try to come up with a shovel-ready project to position it for future funding opportunities. The same scenario exists with the Olive Knox Park. This little piece of property, as it says, is right on the corner of Olive and Knox, and is a result of the Olive Avenue widening and the purchase and subsequent demolition of that property that was on that corner. It's kind of a neat little property directly across the street from the school. And we envision, not exactly sure what it'll look like, but something really cool there. Maybe something different, a little plaza type thing. Obviously drought tolerant landscaping, that sort of thing. So we've programmed money into the next fiscal year, 2021, to do the same, take the same steps that we indicate for India Park, which is to get a consultant on board and hopefully do some of the legwork on the front end. Sunset Park, that's a property on the corner of Westbury and Sunset. It's a vacant piece of land that was gifted to the city. I believe Keith can jump in if I'm wrong, but gifted by Dave Barry during the construction of a housing project in the area. The property sits vacant. We get calls every year and have recently sparked some interest with a couple of service groups that are talking about joining into some kind of partnership and maybe doing at least something there to kind of improve it, I guess. So we've programmed money into this project to try to move it forward. It sat vacant for a long time. It's in an area that would be well used by the local community. We're hopeful to be able to develop construction plans, engineering specifications, and so we have money programmed in the next fiscal year to do that as well. There's also, with the robust residential construction that's currently ongoing, we are obligated to spend down the DIF funding every 5 years. So working with the city planning department, we had envisioned a strategy whereby we move to try to purchase land. And it's important to note that the DIF funding that's received should benefit the area in which it's generated generally. So it makes sense to have vacant pieces of land in different parts of the city, so that as those funds start to accrue, then we have a means by which to expend them. So we have land acquisition in the northwest quadrant of town and the southeast quadrant of town. Both of those areas are very busy in regard to residential construction, so it makes sense. We programmed those funds out, not in this next fiscal year, but the following one. So that would be 21-22. So that about wraps it up. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that.
Certainly.
Any questions from council?
Yes. Yes.
Councilman Robinson.
Yeah, I was wondering if it's possible to at India Park to have a tennis court, constructed in the future.
Absolutely. So that's the beauty of India Park, is that it is a blank slate. And I think it's exciting that we have an opportunity to engage the community. I think tennis courts are a great idea. It's interesting. There's not a single tennis court in the city system. So even in the draft park plan that was developed, it's been almost 10 years ago now. That was something that was definitely highlighted. So I think that many different amenities would be possible.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for that. Councilman Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, John. So the Sunset Park we're talking about is that strip of land across the street from Lincoln?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yes, and I've come across several members of the community that are interested in doing that. I think amongst yourself, we were talking about that not too long ago. The other question I had is on the west side of Madera, the only park that I see is Lionstown and Country, and that park is in need of major rehab on its trails, and I was just wondering if there's anything that is allotted or maybe allocated to that to the repairing of that bike trail or the trail that's in the park?
We don't currently. There is an ongoing project called PK01, and it is funded with LTF. It usually averages about $37,000 a year. I don't, right off the top of my head, know what the fund balance is. I say that to say that there's a possibility that we can react to your request to some degree. If it meets with your approval, let me do a little bit more research. Like I said, I'll dig up what the fund balance is, and I think we can plan something from that point, depending on what the level of funding is.
Yeah, and I say that because I think years back, and this is pre me coming in, I believe there was some plans of maybe getting the pavement and those trails fixed. And again, you know, it's always lack of funding. So you know, in my strive to try to bring new revenues to our community, this would be an example of how we can certainly utilize some additional revenues to help, you know, alleviate these parks that are in need of major, you know, uplift. And so, just something to consider. I know we have this capital improvements and parks is very important for our community. So let's not ignore, especially this park that for a long time, you know, it requires some repair within those trails.
I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman. Councilwoman Gallegos.
Hey, John, good idea, Councilman Rodriguez. I just had a question about spending down the funds and for land acquisitions. And it says here on the CIPs that purchase land for the Northwest and for Southeast isn't happening until 21-22?
Yeah, it's not this next year, it's the following.
The following year. So we don't have any funds to purchase this year at all if we found something that was a good deal in the area?
No, and as Keith had mentioned early on, this plan is subject to council approval.
Okay.
If you had recommended changes, obviously those are things that that we could advise on and entertain. The thought was that, so we're moving forward with planning in several areas. The thought was that in order to identify a property and associated studies that would go into that, do the environmental work, get appraisals. Like with India Park, we had to do a preliminary environmental review. We want to make sure that the property itself is suitable for us to buy and subsequently develop. So it made sense at the time to push it out 1 year in order to give us time to get up ahead of steam and hopefully make it happen. That being said, everything's on the table. We can rearrange. It's up to council discretion.
Okay, thank you.
John, regarding Sunset Park, that's Sunset and Westbury?
Yes, sir.
And Lincoln in between, or not Lincoln, Liberty.
Right.
And I'm just kind of going back by memory. When the developer developed that particular area, it was my understanding it was then the developer's responsibility to provide that park. They just donated the land back to the city and now it's our responsibility?
You know, Mayor, that predates me. Frankly, that's the first time I've ever heard that. So are you saying that it's your understanding that developer was supposed to finish it?
Well, like any other development where it was required of the developer to put in this case, a pocket park or a park in that area. Councilwoman Gallegos, do you disagree?
Yeah, it wasn't required because we did not have the Quimby Act in effect in the city of Madera. So it was land that it was given to the city to do whatever, but that wasn't the area that Dave Berry was promising to put a park on.
No, I thought it was another developer. That was not DMP development.
I'm not sure. But
if we can just look into that.
Yeah, I can look into that. My understanding has always been that came as a result of a Berry development. I'd never heard that that it was a requirement to actually improve the park. But absolutely, I can research that.
Well, the Quimby Act is either build the park or have monies in lieu of.
Yeah.
Okay. This is neither. This is, there was no monies in lieu of, nor was a park being built.
That's correct.
So that's my question. If we can go back to the original agreement with the developer to find out if that land originally was given to the city at time of development, or if the developer was responsible for building a park. That's all I'm asking.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
I'll look into it.
Any other questions for the park projects? Seeing none, thank you, John, very much.
Thank you.
And I believe we are up to Ellen Bitter's section.
Yes, we are. Thank you. So we're moving into the enterprise funded projects, water, sewer, and storm drain. Those funds are generated from the users, the ratepayers. A portion that is left over after paying for maintenance and operation gets set aside for capital improvements. Generally, we hope for our projects to be completely forgettable. They are not exciting. When we're done, we hope that there are no more issues and we move on to the next one. And you know, there's nothing flashy to look at on these. We're fixing deteriorated or deficient systems. We're funding major replacements, maybe at the wastewater treatment plant or within our storm drain, sewer, water system, and also major repairs. Any capacity issues that we've encountered that are not associated with new growth also are funded with enterprise funds. The capacity issues that are tied to new growth generally, ideally would be covered in part or in whole by impact fees, but it's hard to capture all of those impact fees needed for any growth projects. So occasionally there's loans taking place where you have pots of money available and then they'll get paid back by impact fees when they're collected. Generally, the larger capacity increasing projects are and have been identified in our master plans. We're reacting to environmental situations for sewer and water and also regulations. And often if we have infill projects where infrastructure was in place, but it's not adequate to address an infill that's denser, then we might use rate funds to make those improvements. The sewer and water condition assessment studies that Keith talked about earlier, those have both been funded from the rates. It's an ongoing task with a lot of in the field investigations, either the sewer camera going down the lines and looking for deficiencies, and also they've been undertaking water leak detection. You might also see in the list of CIP projects asset management software that is also tied to these condition assessments. Once our facilities are inventoried, if we get them in a current asset management software, we can maintain our records on those facilities, and it will essentially spit out what our long-range plan of repair and replacements are. So that's an initial investment, but that should assist the process for many years to come. Next slide. So we're going to take a look at some projects that were completed this year with the rates. This is the wastewater treatment plant. If you recall, it was a large investment in making essential repairs to the facility. This photo is one of the 3 clarifiers that was improved. Also in the background of the photo, you'll see 3 white columns. Those represent the pumps that are on top of the primary effluent pump station that was rebuilt through a $1.5 million change order. And then there's also reserve capacity for a future pump on the right side of that. Having the funds in place allowed us to complete this improvement, and it relieves a future burden of the sewer fund because, as you saw from those photos, it was on its last legs. These are photos that were taken from a sewer project. It was called S1602. We replaced the sewer main in West Smith, just east of Lake Street, and also in Sherwood, west of Lake Street along the Pan Am Park, and it went on up to almost D Street. That was a project that it was an undercapacity pipeline, and we were able to increase the size of that so it will hold for many years to come. Also with this project, we were able to capture some of the deficiencies that have been noted in the video inspections. The lower left photo shows actually what the camera sees when it's inside the sewer pipe. As you can tell, the roots grew into this clay pipe, and it's fractured and it's collapsing, and even the annotation from the cameraman was that he had to abandon the survey because he couldn't get the camera through it. So that happened to be the Dalton Riverside Alley, where we also replaced that pipeline with this project. And then we adjusted approximately 21 manholes to grade. So they had been covered with asphalt or concrete, and so we put in city standard manhole covers and with the proper concrete collar around them. Most of them are going out to the wastewater treatment plant. So A, we can always get in and access them for maintenance, and B, they had to be done so that we can complete our sewer video inspection going out to the treatment plant. So what do we have coming up this next year? A lot of the projects you saw on last year's list. With one thing we do note, when we have a lot of projects in construction, it does divert some of our in-house resources to answering construction questions during construction, and also just assisting in that process. So some of the lift stations that need attention and further analysis are on deck for this year. Also, we had talked about the sewer main replacement in Mainbury. That's a similar condition with old clay pipe with roots growing into it. So that one's on deck. And then there is a list of deficiencies that have been provided from our consultant that are just lumped together in a, we have an 18-19, and then we have a 19-20 list also that we're gonna try to get through both of them this year. Now moving to the water funds, this year, one of our outputs was the study on the old water tower, and I'm going to let Victor give a brief discussion on where we are on that one.
Right, I'll be providing some updates. So we have received the preliminary studies for this location. Just so you all know, this location of the tank is right next to the Frank Burgon Senior Center on 7th and D Street. So the preliminary study concluded that the tank as it stands right now is safer than what we previously assumed, based on a report that was released back in the 1980s. So what this entails, what this means is that we do have more flexibility in terms of when we need to do those improvements. Whether we could extend it out a couple of months, couple of years, or furthermore. But you'll be seeing the report coming to council sometime soon. I'm hoping within the next couple of months. Our consultant that's working with us will be presenting the project and presenting the council options on retaining the tank as it stands, rehabilitating it, or completely removing the tank. So I'll move on to the next slide.
Thank you.
I'll take it back to Ellen now.
So some other projects in the CIP regarding tanks. The Cook tank or the South Street tank that's on the left side of your screen. There's 2 projects in there for a structural analysis and also an analysis of the coatings, both interior and exterior. Those are to span this year and 2021 and 21-22. And then we continue to work on our potential future Northeast tank. The consultant has completed an analysis of the different sites that were under consideration, and we're hoping to bring that to council this summer for perhaps further direction on a site or 2 to pursue further for acquisition. Other projects, we've started work, the water main replacement across the Fresno River. The consultant is starting to coordinate with all of the agencies that are involved in the Fresno River. We have an alignment and enough technical data where they can present the project and find out what their requirements, constraints, and conditions are going to be, and then we can move into final design for that project. Another compilation of projects, 3 of them in total, relate to water meters. We were very fortunate to have received Integrated Regional Water Management Grant, IRWIM is what we call it. It was a collaborative effort between the county and the city, and they took the lead on submitting to the state, but we received about $769,000 to assist with installation of meters where they're missing, and also replacing the old style meters that are not reading well, and we're losing revenues, and we're not getting the data that's needed to know where leaks are. And so that is quite a benefit, and we're able to bring forward a lot of projects that were held for outer years because we didn't have the funds yet. And then also we continue to inventory and work on a replacement program for all of the older meters that were installed 15, 20 years ago, and get in a program so that they're replaced regularly in an ongoing project, either through Public Works or through engineering. The other major project you see is the equipping and finishing of well 37. That well site is on Granada, just north of Sunset, south of the VFW there, in the airport land. The vineyards are there. It was developed several years ago and then kind of put on hold, or shelf ready, if you call it. So there are a few development proposals that should they trigger the need for additional water supply. We're proposing to do some testing on this well and make sure it's still good, and move forward with finishing it and bringing it online.
And I just want to jump in here real quickly. It was a month or 2 ago that I mentioned that there might be some concern with regard to the available capacity within our well system. In the last few weeks, we commissioned a study of our master plan consultant to review where we stand with regard to our capacity. And that study came back and indicated that we seem to have 2 reserve wells available for future growth. This is 2 wells after we've already accounted for everything that we anticipate going in the ground throughout town, various different subdivisions, commercial projects, and the like. So we're looking fairly well with regard to capacity, but droughts have a way of dropping the water table and reducing the efficiency of wells. So we will be keeping a close look on this, and well 37 is one of our potential additions to the capacity.
And that being said, Keith, if I may, as we talk about future development, and on this project where we talk about the Pecan sewer issue, there's development going on right now on Pecan near 145. Planning Commission just approved a multi-phase project also at Pecan and 145. Mr. Crown has development on Stadium in that particular area, 80 plus homes, and we just talked about the possible road maintenance, as well as over on Tozier, multiple homes. What I'm leading to is a lot of this funding does come from development impact fees. And as we talk about Village D and moving forward, I really want to send a message to council and have them aware that I believe that we are not comparable with our development impact fees, and we get further and further behind. Water and sewer, Ellen, may not be sexy, but is absolutely essential to growth in our community. One, we're looking to find out if we have water, whether it's on the outskirts of town with agriculture projects or development projects. Where does the water come from? And once we determine that, two, how do we get it from point A to point B? Whether it's wastewater treatment or to get water from the west side of town all the way to the east side of town, which you talked about in water storage. The money has to come from somewhere. And as we grow and develop, whether it's traffic signals, water, sewer, what have you, we really, really, I feel, are missing the boat if we have not done a proper assessment and we're not charging the proper development impact fees to pay for these things.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I've heard this conversation before, but it's been more or less in passing. And so have we actually given direction to staff to move forward with this item?
Well, it was my intent, Mr. Council, or Mayor Pro Tem, thank you very much for that. But before the evening was over, I was going to give that very same speech and ask that we make this part of a priority as we talk about council priorities and moving forward.
Yes, Mayor and council members, and this is on top of kind of, really the to-do list. The challenge that we're having right now is we're juggling. There's a lot of balls in the air. And it's not that we're ignoring it. It's simply a capacity issue right now. However, as we're bringing staff on, these are some of the assignments that are going to be tasked to those individuals to go back through the development impact fee study. It's a very intense process. It's time consuming. There's a lot of public outreach, and we are going to move it forward. We understand that it's imperative that we have a div study that reflects current pricing, because if we don't, it goes back to what the mayor indicated, that we do fall behind, and our goal is definitely not to fall behind.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. I appreciate that. And I can speak for council when I say we completely understand that we are short-staffed and we have a lot of balls in the air, and especially now with COVID-19 on top of that does not make things any easier. So I know it is a priority. I just want to let the record reflect that we need to make sure that we move swiftly on this as soon as we can. Thanks, Keith. We can continue.
Okay, thank you. Ellen?
Okay, this is the last slide regarding enterprise funds, and it's for storm drain. It's a very small revenue stream because we're restricted on how you can adjust the rates, and it would require a Prop 218 vote for storm drain fees. So, but there were enough funds in the pot that we were able to make a repair on Knox Street earlier this year, south of Olive. It was it wasn't that old of a pipe, but it was of such a material that it was not handling the load being so deep in the ground. And so we partnered with one of our community members, ADS Pipe, and they supplied a couple lengths of pipe. And then we brought in one of our contractors that we work with, Rolf Construction, and we were able to make that repair to the Knox Street storm drain. I can take any questions on any of these projects or in the list. Otherwise, that concludes enterprise funds.
Great, Ellen. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I meant what I said. Water and sewer is very, very important. Don't cut yourself short.
Mr. Mayor, I did
Yes.
raise my hand. I'm not sure if you can see the.
I just got to my full
Okay.
screen right now and saw it. Thank you,
No
Mr.
worries.
Councilman. Councilman Rodriguez.
Yes, and before we move on, Ellen, you know, I was fascinated by the technology that we're using to identify certain cracks in the sewer lines and/or water mains. Now, when we go through this process, is this we do this as a reaction, or do we do this proactively by running through certain lines and having this technology go through so that we can see how our lines are if they're in need of repair or not?
This has been a proactive approach. It was quite coincidental that we had already put the request for proposals out on the street a few years ago for this study when we had our break in Schnorr, the collapse of the sewer main. But it's a good tool, and periodically the city has used it. For this round, we went with the highest risk lines. Those are pipelines that might be in busy streets, or they're the large pipelines that carry a lot of flow that we can't, it would be very detrimental if anything happened to those. So we were able to camera about 50% of the city's lines with this first phase, and actually we're funded through the rates to do another phase when this one is complete.
Thank you. And the second question that I bring to that is, you know, as cities become smarter cities and technology becomes more available, and I'll ask this because I don't know, I'm not an engineer, but is there such technology that allows, when development occurs, to add this technology to be able to somehow maintain somewhat of a, not an eye, so to speak, but maintain to see if any repairs are warranted for such big projects like this?
I know when we've brought in subdivisions and maybe they've been stagnant for a while, we do require them to camera their lines before we accept it. And I think moving forward, any new developments that come in, we require them to be cameraed also. And then we can log those in a GIS system eventually. So we'll have that initial record of what it looked like, and we can periodically monitor it, you know, every 5 to 7 years to see what the condition is and how much it has degraded, and if any fix is needed on it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you referenced the Schnorr incident, but I think in years to come, we can potentially see a lot more, but you guys taking the proactive approach of utilizing that technology can certainly give us a view of what's needed. I know that for a long period of time, just the lack of funding, especially with these projects, certain areas get just they're turned to the wayside, and we don't look at these, and we react when we can be proactive and look into these repairs ahead of time. So thank you for answering that. I just was fascinated by the technology that was there, and it just triggered for me to ask the question.
It's great video.
Yes, it is.
If anybody wants to watch live sewer, there's more than you ever want to see.
Thank you, Alan. Next, Councilman Robinson raised his hand, and then Councilwoman Gallegos. But I also see our finance director, Mr. Sanchez, raised his hand. So I'm not sure if that was maybe to answer Councilman Rodriguez's question.
I have a quick question, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Of course.
I was just curious on the infrastructure. If we keep track of the useful life of pipes or drainage, and if, let's say, if after 20 years or so, we keep track as to what might merit some inspections, and if there's a program for inspections, I was just curious on that, taking into account the estimated useful life of the assets.
I can address that. So the outcome of the sewer and water condition assessment studies will be that product, and then tagging that with an asset management software, we'll be able to keep up with it, and that is the goal, that we should be able to generate and monitor the useful life and know when inspections or maintenance will be required programmed out ahead of time so we can do our budgets around it as well.
Thank you.
Councilman Robinson, and then Councilwoman Gallegos.
Then Councilman Holly.
I'm sorry, Mr. Councilman, you're muted.
Okay, I was wondering what happened to that project for that storm drain pond that's across the street from the Sunrise Park. It was supposed to be for flood control. It was a drainage pipe that's supposed to be going out of the pond. Whatever happened to that?
Yeah, I'm not. Can you give me that location again? I'm not sure.
It's by on the backside of Sunrise Park, at that new development. You know, it's a half completed development, and they had well, you wanted the developer to either build a holding pond there.
Basin.
A basin, yes.
Okay.
And you were thinking about having the storm drainage pipe either go toward the river or whatever.
Okay.
To the canal. And you were going to talk to MID about.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right.
As with regard to this basin, we still have not come to resolution. The basin is up a little bit to the north of what I see in the picture here. We still have not come to resolution. I think that something is going to happen in the relative near future with regard to that. I will go ahead and say that there appears to be a buyer for the subdivision itself. And they are aware, the buyer is aware of the punch list that is associated with the subdivision. And they are also aware that the basin is part of that.
Okay.
Any other topics on that? Some of this I may end up talking to council in closed session on yet.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Councilwoman Gallegos.
My questions, I don't know, is for Alan or for Keith. We had that mishap of the water line with PG&E that was on Howard and Schnorr more on Howard Road at that signal light. And part of it is because we didn't have, and I've heard that from a couple of our employees that I've asked, we don't have a mapping system that says where are all the water piping and the sewer piping. Is it possible to put in the CIP some type of funding so that we can have a mapping of all our water lines and sewer lines that are under the ground so that we can locate them? Because I know a lot of those pipings are old, and not those employees that worked with us years ago that know where they are at are no longer around.
Sure. Arnaldo, do you have those turned up? Otherwise, I'll go ahead and show council what we have.
Please go ahead and show council what we have, Keith.
Okay.
I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
I shared the wrong one. Hold on. Can you see that map?
That's a budget map.
I'm sorry.
That's the budget. I believe you had it on the right one the first time.
Okay, so you see the aerial photo?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Give you an example of what we do have. This is not up to date. This map is fairly old. We've been updating many of these with the with our master plan consultant as part of the. They're also our consultant with regard to the sewer water assessments. What you see here is an example of what we have for the sewer lines throughout the city. We have a good many of them. Everybody in the city has access to them. You can drill down on any particular location, and you can click on a manhole and get an idea of what the elevation is on the manhole lid itself and what the elevations are for the inverts of the pipe. So we do have much of this stuff.
We have sewer and water, Keith?
I'll go ahead and show you storm.
Okay.
I'll try to show you. There you go. This shows much of the storm drain pipe within the city.
Okay.
As an example, when you look at spots like this, you'll see that's the beginning of the storm drain system, and there's actually a pipe in the ground. We click on that, and it shows that it's a 30-inch diameter pipe. When you go down to the road to this particular location, this is actually called a siphon. As the water flows down the curb, it'll go around the corner and into a drop inlet, flow across the road, pop back up, and continue its path. We have most of these accounted for in the city. The red lines that you see here, these are actually MID facilities. They prepared this on a GIS format, and they have shared that with us.
How long have we had this system, this mapping, Keith?
We've had this for at least 10 years.
Okay, so our employees are familiar with this?
The Public Works Department does have a copy of it. Much of this was actually surveyed by an employee in the Public Works Department 10 years ago.
But the employees that are on the ground, our street and sewer employees, do they have access to this mapping to know where it's at?
I could not speak to whether they do or don't. Dan might be able to, but I suspect he hasn't come across this skill yet.
I think it might be something that we might look into training our employees, because they don't have knowledge of this, I'm pretty sure.
Sure.
I didn't know we even had this.
So I can speak to, if I can jump in real quick.
Sure.
I do know some of them do, because they made me aware of it.
Okay.
So I've been over there for a short time, and I was quite impressed with it when I saw it. So I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody on the ground level, of course,
right.
But I was quite impressed with it. I know they do have access to it over at Public Works.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, there are many live tools that we could put into place. It's an investment, and if it assists in their jobs, those type of investments can pay off.
Great.
If they have it right there with them. The last was water.
Yeah, something to eat.
And this is the water system through town. One of the interesting things, I think, if you zoom in on downtown, actually looks better than I expect. We're missing a number of valves in the downtown area. That's one of our CIP projects. But yes, we do have water, sewer, and storm drain. Let's see, I'm going to try to flip this back over. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do it. Oh, there we go. I'm going to stop the share for a moment and then restart it. Let's see, Ellen, had you completed this? I think that you had.
Yes, I was done.
Okay. The next
Councilman Holly, I'm sorry, Councilman Holly with us?
Yes.
I believe Councilman Holly said he had a question. Maybe we can come back to him. Go ahead, Keith. Thank you.
Okay. This is DIF-funded water, sewer, and storm projects, and in particular, sewer. This is the Pecan Avenue parallel sewer main. This says Barnett Way to Stadium as part of the project, but a few years ago it would have said SR 99 to Stadium. What we've been doing to go ahead and fund this is to condition projects to build portions of the sewer that is necessary to provide us the capacity. The first piece of that pipe, which was SR 99 to essentially to Barnett Way, that gave us about another 350, 500 units of capacity. We have another piece that is proposed to go in. That'll get us another few hundred beyond that. And then yet another piece will kick us up a couple thousand units and allow us to continue growing on the east side of the city. I call this, I'm kind of referring to this as a backup to our approach to having developers build it and fund it. The reason I call it as a backup is some of these projects have gotten more complicated for some of the engineers than I would like. So we're putting this in as a backup. If we need to, we'll pull the plug on this and move forward with the project. Right now, we're about, I think, $900,000 short in funding. We're pulling together impact fees from the existing service area, which is the center part of town, and I believe the northeast or southeast quadrants. Through credits with developers, we're trying to incentivize this construction of the sewer main. And that is, I think, all of the utilities.
My question was, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go right ahead, Mr. Councilman.
I was on mute. That's why you didn't hear me. Mr. Keith, I'd like to thank you guys for improving that Knox sewer line that busted over there. That you guys took care of that in a timely manner. Had numerous complaints from people, but as you know, Ron Montoya, he came and thanked you as well. So if he's pleased, I was pleased.
You're very welcome. That was, I believe that was Ellen and I think Victor as well, right?
Yes, yes. Thank y'all. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman.
And probably our construction management department as well.
All the above.
All the above. Okay, moving on to the next part. 9 is transit. The building is complete. It's been accepted. It was about $4.2 million, utilizing FDA, Prop 1B, and PTI MISEA funding. I don't know why I can say that, not the rectangular rapid flashing. But this is complete, ready for occupancy and a ribbon cutting once we get past the need to go ahead and shelter. We have the fire station here, also very nearly complete. I think that one of the last things is the terrazzo floor. Jerry, do you have anything else to add on the fire station? You're on mute, Jerry. There
you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Jerry.
Yeah, basically all the structural construction is done. Our last progress payment for April indicated that there's just painting and some issues to complete after the floor is completed, and bringing in the appliances that they go in the kitchen. So we're pretty much on schedule to complete the project. I think the IT manager wants to come in first part of June and start installing computers. And then I'm looking at going to council either August 5th or August 19th as far as acceptance of project.
Hey, Jerry, please explain why it's August, that you need to close out various pieces of the project and the financing and all that, if you would.
What's that, Keith?
You obviously the building you're saying is going to be about June for completion, and acceptance is August. If you could go ahead and provide council insight as to why it'll be coming through in August.
Yeah, we have to wait up a little bit. There are some project issues we have with replacement of concrete. We have to wait a little bit for that. Otherwise, we could accept the project and say mid-July. But I think where we are with the progress payments are that the contract is almost all paid up. Just a few of those items that I mentioned before. The issues, we have to wait a little bit because we're having some problem with replacement of concrete slabs that were not constructed according to plans and specifications.
Okay. Thank you, Jerry. I think the next well, we're 2 slides away. Back to me. We have the category of bridges in this particular in our CIP, and we have some rehabilitation of bridges. We have a couple that need some assistance in town, or actually several, and those are Fresno River bridges at Cleveland and Gateway and Clark Street. Those projects are moving along. They're not necessarily a high priority, but we do want to go ahead and get to those here in the near term, next year or so. There's also the Granada Pedestrian Bridge. We've made a run at 1 or 2 grants on the Granada Bridge. And what we've determined is we think we need to go ahead and do a design on this and get it to a shelf-ready place, and we might have a better shot at going after some grants if we have a shelf-ready project that shows that we can go ahead and get that grant and move it to construction relatively quickly. So it's something we're looking at right now. Then there's the future bridge needs. The Westbury Bridge construction comes up every so often. That generally is a funding issue. I think currently I have that at about $7 million project, and we have about, I thought I had another slide here. Yeah, there we go. It's about a $7 million project, and a current balance in the account that we would use to fund that has $3.6 million in it, with an expected debit against it of $1.090 million to assist in improvements at the Avenue 17 and Sharon Boulevard construction. It generates a little over $200,000 a year, so I can't go ahead and show or indicate that the bridge will be constructed in the next few years or so. But so until we have funding, it will be shown at the latter end of our CIP program.
At that rate, it's 30 years. Councilwoman Gallegos has a question, Keith.
Sure. I think you're muted.
The CIP shows that it will look, we're going to look into it in the 24-25 year. And yeah. It says because there won't need to accommodate growth for 5 to 10 years. Well, if Todd Phelps is looking to develop that area around there, and other developers are, it's going to be sooner than 5 or 10 years. And that's too much pressure on that Granada and Schnorr Bridge that we're going to be putting on without that Westbury. Is it possible to do some type of, I know we already have impact fees, but some type of bridge fee for developers that will be developing between now and then to kind of raise the funds to build this bridge sooner than over 5 to 10 years?
The bridge fee, it might be something like an area of benefit. We'd have to, and I think I think that's what was originally planned when the bridge was envisioned with a berry development in the area. For whatever reason, it was never put in place. It predates me.
Right.
So that bridge is in the transportation impact fee, and over the course of a number of years, that impact fee program has been used to pay for other things such as undergrounding along Ellis and something else as well. As an example, I'll go ahead and say that $1,090,000 has been allocated to Avenue 17 and Sharon. I think one of our best possibilities for funding that bridge is in the upcoming development impact fee program. Depending upon the final how it finally looks, if it goes the way is shown, that impact fee program will show that it's taking fees to cover roadways, bridges, undergrounding, and a number of other things. If that fee is accepted as it is, it will generate a fairly decent amount of cash, wherein council can pick and choose where they'd like to see the funding go first. if it's the bridge, we probably could go ahead and accumulate enough cash for it over the course of a 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I won't guess at it, but that's probably our best ability to fund it is the impact fee program with the way it's envisioned. And that impact fee program, it doesn't just have this bridge in it, it has probably 10 other bridges.
I do know that in my district and Councilman Rodriguez's, our residents are going to kick and scream because they were kicking and screaming about the development, and we need housing in the city of Madera, and we have developers that are looking at housing in that area, but a lot of it's not going to come forth without that bridge or even knowledge of it happening, because right now we talk about it and it's not even on the table. And so that's something I think we need to really look at in the city and as council, that is something that's going to, if we're going to look at affordable housing or housing in the city that's going to develop, which they're already looking, we're going to need to look forward, and that we can't wait 5 to 10 years for that bridge. That's
sure. I agree.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure if there's any other.
Yes, Councilman Rodriguez.
So back to the mayor's point in regards to the development impact fees. You know, there's more construction and more permits being pulled, especially on the north west side of town, and especially with Village D that's coming on board. We have to try to take on this here with time being of the essence, only because I believe, Keith, that if developers go out and pull permits, once those permits are pulled, are they then required to pay any additional development impact fees if we come up with something after the fact?
No, they're not. The impact fees they pay are what is currently on our books right now for whatever account we might be talking about, whether it's the transportation fee or the arterial fee or the traffic signal fee. Once they're paid, they're done.
So I think this is why time is of the essence with these development impact fees. And we hope, I know that the study was done, or a study was warranted that predates me. And since I've been in the council, we've been putting this on the back burner. So I think it's time that we start visiting that and hopefully, you know, we're not having too much development going without really collecting the necessary funds to pay for a lot of this infrastructure that's due.
Understood.
Thank you for that, Mr. Councilman. I appreciate those comments more than you know. Let's continue, Keith.
It's the last one. This is Randy's.
Saving the best for last, I guess.
All right.
This is the downtown plan, which was approved by council in April, and it's a plan for multimodal improvements with about a $28 million cost for this. It includes bulb outs and streetlights and high visibility crosswalks and other improvements like that, all in the downtown area. So this is something that we're looking into funding here soon.
Okay, Keith. Okay, thank you. Recommended action at this point. We're ready to take any more questions, of course. The recommended action, however, would be to approve a minute order accepting the report and then authorize submittal of CIP to the Planning Commission for determination of conformity. I'll just go ahead and elaborate on this a little bit. This is the way we had it last year, and as we were, our city attorney let us know that generally speaking, we don't need to do any of this stuff, but what we're doing here for the most part is something we started a few years ago. About 4 or 5 years ago, we didn't really do this with council, and we determined that this was something that we wanted to do and council wanted to do, and we started doing these more complete CIP presentations. Well, we don't necessarily need council to go ahead and say send it to the Planning Commission. I think it's a very nice thing to do.
I agree, Keith. I do. Any further questions of Keith or anyone else that Councilwoman Gallegos?
Thank you. I was trying to put the hand, but I couldn't get it fast enough. I've seen this since I've been on council, and it's coming up on construction, but I keep seeing it, and I don't know how come it's not the project's not going through fast enough. It's not a very difficult project, I'm thinking, and it's the paving of the parking lot on Station 56 and 57.
I have sort of an answer for you.
Okay.
Jerry Martinez is freeing up with the fire station and the transit facility, and he will be doing that.
So what does the time frame look like for that?
I'm not sure if Jerry's done anything with it thus far. Jerry, are you still there?
Yes. Yes. Let me add something here that we bid out Station 57 on Schnorr. It's been a couple of years ago, and the bids came in high. So we needed to get additional funding, and at the time the funding was not there. And in the last few months, I recommended some additional funding be provided for Station 57, Schnorr, and also 56, which is Lake Street.
Yeah, Jerry, I think I recall it a little differently. I think we were ready to bid it out, and we came to.
We actually bid out 57, but the bids came in high.
Okay.
We did not bid Lake Street 56.
Okay.
The bids can be combined to get a better deal because you're paving both stations?
Yes.
Okay.
By all means, yeah.
And so do we have bids out right now on those stations?
No, we do not. Jerry, what were you planning to do with that? Was that just simply to go ahead and hire a contractor and have them shoot the grades on the site and reproduce what is already at the fire station, or were we regrading? I think
because it was a mill and overlay. We did all the design in-house for Station 57, and we intend to do the same thing for 56, and bid them together for cost savings. But the additional funding needs to be provided in the next fiscal year.
Okay. Well, it sounds like I need to go ahead and look back at the CIP and the funding that is in there.
Yeah. If I may, so
yes.
Council may recall in the existing CIP, we had allocated $100,000 for the repavement.
Mm-hmm.
And the initial plan was that would cover Station 57. And in this upcoming fiscal year, we would do Station 56. With that being said, because we were not able to complete Station 57, the plan is that we'll combine the both. We will come back with council. There is an adequate amount of funding within the fire department Measure K fund. And so we'll be recommending that we allocate those funds for the repaving of both fire stations. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, City Manager.
Just for clarification, Mr. Rodriguez, is that going to go out to bid again, or Mr. Martinez said the bids came in kind of high? Are we going to then use the lowest bidder that we already have?
So my understanding is the bid was, I think the bid was completed prior to my arrival. I don't think we received any new bids. Correct, Jerry?
We bid it about over 2 years ago. So we'll have to rebid it and hopefully include both stations at the same time.
Okay. Councilman Robinson. You're on mute.
I was wondering about the Ellis Bridge. Do we still have the beautification committee still operating? Because they haven't done anything to
we don't have one.
The center medium.
We don't have one.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe the Park and Rec can do something about the center medium, add plants or whatever.
I can respond to that. Is that the Avenue 16 overcrossing?
No,
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, the Ellis Bridge.
Yes.
Yes. Right. So when that was constructed, there were several tree wells that were installed.
And it's still there.
Yeah, the problem is that there's no, in fact, this piping was installed into the tree wells, but there's nowhere off-site to connect the piping to. So, yeah, it's one of those just kind of weird situations. We're trying to navigate through it. We haven't come up with the solution as of yet, but we will.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Maybe a cactus.
Yeah.
Any further questions of Keith or the engineering team?
Job well done.
I agree. Thank you all very, very much. So if there are no further questions, and just for clarification, Alicia, have we received any communication via email or otherwise?
None received.
Thank you very much. If there's no further questions or discussion, I'll bring it to council for action.
So move to approve the minute order.
It's been moved by Councilman Hawley to approve item A1, which is adopt the minute order accepting the proposed projects in the city's CIP 5-year plan and authorizing the city engineer to submit the draft 5-year plan to the Planning Commission. And it's been seconded by Councilman Robinson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. And as was previously said, thank you everybody for your hard work and your tenacity in getting this done. We look forward to all these improvements over the next 5 years.
Thank you, council.
So now keep you all lunch for staying over this meeting.
Yeah. And we do not have council reports on the agenda. So with that, I will accept an adjournment to the next meeting, which will be June 3rd.
So move to approve.
Second.
Once again, moved and seconded by the dynamic duo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
Aye.
Aye.